Welcome to FPB's Meet the Candidates. This Cable 10 series allows you, the voter, to hear directly from the candidates and their views on the issues that are important to us. This is leading up to the primary election, which is on May 21st. Today's guest, I have Miche Branscum, a Democratic candidate for the state representative in Kentucky's 56th district. I'd like to thank you for your time and your visit. And if you could just tell us about yourself.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm a mom and a wife. I don't consider myself a politician. This is all new to me. I grew up on a farm in southeastern Kentucky. I'm the daughter of a direct care provider who worked for the state for 27 years. My dad is a retired professional firefighter. So I've kind of grown up around service. Now, growing up, I didn't have a whole lot of money because, again, those aren't exactly high-paid careers. But one thing my mom taught me at an early age is, you always give back, and it's something I took to heart. She said you may not have money to donate, but you always have time. So from a very early age, about 14 or so, I've been involved in nonprofit work and volunteer work and charity work. So I've done a lot in that area. I consider myself an animal person. I'm an animal lover. I've supported law enforcement. I've supported the military with various nonprofits. It's just some way to help because I'm the type of person that if I feel like there's a need in the community and I can meet that need, I'm going to do it.
Okay.
And that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
Because I feel like we need more people who are just average Kentuckians in the House of Representatives. I feel like there are a lot of laws being passed that impact us, and we don't have a lot of say in the matter. So here I am.
Okay. And so you live in Duckers, is that right?
I do. I live in Duckers.
Okay. You said you have a lot of animals.
I have 2 animals.
Okay.
But I've done a lot of animal rescue work.
Okay.
But yeah.
So do you have dogs, cats?
I have 2 dogs.
2 dogs.
I have Hank and Dixie, yeah.
Okay. All right. So you kind of told us why you chose to run, to give back. Was there anything that triggered your decision to run?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it's, I think, a really sweet story, but it involves my son.
Okay.
So I may be a little biased. About 5 years ago, my son and I were watching a TV segment, and it was a news story about how Ohio had made the state pet the rescue pet.
Yep.
Just a symbolic gesture, but the point was to raise awareness about homeless animals. Now, my son, in his little 6-year-old cuteness, said, "Mom, that's a great idea. We should do that." So as a mom, I'm like, okay, we'll write a letter. I thought that'd be the end of it. But honestly, our then Representative Joe Gravis, we wrote the letter. He loved it. He picked it up. He ran with the idea. He introduced a bill. It's been in session 5 years now. Don't know if you've noticed, but we still don't have a state pet.
Yeah.
And it got me to thinking, my son, cute kid, symbolic bill, doesn't cost anything, just to raise awareness about homeless animals. So if a cute child can't get a symbolic bill passed to raise awareness about animals dying in shelters, what chance do the rest of us have with being heard on actually, big, important matters?
Right.
So I thought, I did what moms do.
Yeah.
I thought, you know what? I don't want this for my son and his peers. When they grow up, I want them to have a Kentucky where the representatives listen to their constituents and, represent them. It's kind of in the title. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to run. And I did.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, for people who don't know, you're running for the 56th district. Could you describe how that?
Yes, the 56th district is part of Franklin County, sort of the eastern part, Duckers up to Owenton Road, through the Peaks Mill community, all of Woodford, and part of Jessamine and around the Wilmore area. So just
Southern
kind of
Jessamine County,
yeah.
a little bit. Okay. And what do you see as being the responsibilities of being a state representative?
First and foremost, I think the biggest responsibility, and I'm just going to be honest, I think one of the areas that they're not really meeting is to listen to their constituents. At the heart of the matter, they work for us. They represent us. And honestly, I don't get the feeling that that's happening a lot of the time. We have a supermajority. Everything's getting pushed through on the party line. I just don't feel like that's good governance. I believe we do need debate. We do need to actually look at issues and find out what actually is best for Kentucky.
Okay. What experience have you had to do this job?
Well, like I said, I'm a mom. I'm not your typical politician, obviously. I am a former state employee, so I actually worked in programs like DCBS, SNAP benefits. I was a caseworker, so I've administered some of those programs, and I worked in unemployment insurance. And I actually worked in unemployment insurance for 3 different states because during the coronavirus situation, I was recruited as a contractor for Alabama and Hawaii. So I know unemployment law. I know the programs, and quite frankly, I'm kind of a policy buff.
Yeah.
So I like policy. I like learning about it. But quite frankly, I think what makes me a good candidate is the fact that I'm just not a politician.
Okay.
You know, the fact is we have enough politicians down the street making laws for us. I feel like we need some people that are actually the, quote, worker bees. Who's looking out for us? So I think that is what makes me qualified.
Okay. Well, okay, so you mentioned you're probably going to be in the minority because there is a supermajority.
Right.
And so, how are you going to address that? How are you going to not be discouraged that you don't get everything you want done and get done the things you can get done?
I'm going to say something that may be controversial.
Okay.
I don't think it's good governance for everybody to get everything they want because I feel like compromise is sort of central to the process. And I think part of it is just being willing to listen and negotiate. But then there are certain issues you may need to dig in on, But I am willing to reach out and talk to people on either side. I actually, I grew up in Somerset, which I'm sure, as you know, is a very heavily conservative and Republican district. My family are all Republicans. So, I have experience talking to Republicans and working with them. I kind of been doing it my whole life. So I don't see why that would be any different.
Okay. Some people think that America is more divided today than any other time, at least in our lifetimes. Do you agree with that? And what would you do to try to remedy that situation?
I have to say I do agree with that to a point. I feel like there are certain issues that are being brought forth and brought out that are divisive, and I feel like there's a point to that because it detracts and we aren't paying attention to other issues if we're focusing on things. So I do feel like we are divided, and it does make me sad because this is kind of not the United States I grew up with. It's not the Kentucky I grew up in, I want us to get back to where we agree and we compromise and we can just sort of say, I don't agree with you on that issue, but that's okay. You're right. You're an American. So yes, I do feel like we are divided. As far as what could I do to remedy that situation, I think part of it is just listening and being willing to talk, because I feel like we're not really talking and communicating across the party lines anymore. We're just sort of tribing up in our various tribes based on what letter we have behind our name. And
Right.
I'm getting back to the good governance. I don't feel like that's good governance. As I said, the purpose of government is to represent the people. And I don't feel like we're being represented. I feel like we're being distracted. I feel like there's several issues that need to be addressed, and they aren't. So
Right.
that's what we need to be focusing on.
Well, these are some of the questions that were actually sent to us. So Frankfort's home to more state retirees than
Right.
any other community. The only authority to grant a cost of living adjustment lies with the General Assembly. As a legislator that will represent these folks, what kind of commitment can you make to helping them protect their state retirement fund and supporting a cost of living adjustment for retirees?
Honestly, that is one of my key issues. As I mentioned, my mom was a state retiree, which she passed in 2014. My dad is currently a retiree. My husband's a state employee. He's going to be retiring. I actually am a former state employee. I have money in the retirement system. When I say this is important to me, it's important to me. And I think it's very unfair that our retirees aren't getting their COLAs. My dad has not had a COLA since he retired. And, as all of us know, whenever we go to the grocery store, inflation is real.
Yeah.
And they're having to do more on less. And I absolutely support our retirees. And I do think a COLA is very important. And quite frankly, I'm shocked that the budget did not allow for that, considering we have a huge surplus. Why aren't we giving our retirees a COLA?
Right.
So.
Well, okay, on education. How do you feel about some of the things going on right now, charter schools, vouchers?
Okay, that's a good question.
Okay.
I will say I absolutely support the right of parents to make the decision to educate their children where they feel the child fits best. Some kids may thrive in public school, some kids may thrive in private school, even homeschool. But I vehemently oppose using any public dollars to pay for that because our public schools are already strapped for cash. I actually worked for a short time in aftercare in Franklin County Schools, and I can tell you that what the teachers and the staff do with what they have is amazing, and I welcome anyone who doubts what our teachers do and how hard they work to go substitute. I'm sure they will sign you up tomorrow. But I don't feel like we need to divert funds. I feel like actually out of all the areas we should be putting funds and setting them aside, it is education. And honestly, I feel like this is actually a national security issue. I used to be a recruiter for one of the big 5 tech companies. And one of the things that I looked for were people who had STEM degrees in certain fields. And I can tell you it was very hard to find people who originated in this area, in that degree field. Other countries are investing in education. If we do not do it, we will fall behind. So I feel like, more money needs to go through public schools, not less. So I oppose using public school dollars for charter schools and vouchers.
What do you think about the legislators' role regarding reproductive health care? Do you think that's an appropriate role?
That is a very great question. I'm glad you asked that because that is another one of my key areas.
Okay.
My son, when I had him, who I mentioned earlier, I had a high-risk pregnancy. And I actually had an emergency C-section. It was a very scary time for us. My son was born, he was cyanotic, he had acidosis, which is actually one of the major risk factors for cerebral palsy. We had a good outcome, thank goodness. But we had a good outcome because we were able to have, immediate good care. He was immediately taken into a, NICU. He was treated. I have recently become aware that Kentucky is second worst in the nation for maternal health outcomes, which just floored me because of the care I received. But we have 76 counties that don't even have a practicing OB. And that really concerned me because what would have happened to my son and myself had we had the misfortune of just being in the wrong geographic location at the time?
Right.
So I feel like we need to be doing things to encourage more doctors to come into the state, not less.
Okay.
So, to answer your question, I'm not sure they have a place
Okay.
in that process. So.
Okay. Talking about taxes. There's been an effort in the tax code changes to move more towards consumption-based taxes, expanding sales tax, reducing individual income taxes. What's your opinion on those moves?
A consumption-based tax is a regressive tax. It negatively impacts the poor and middle class. What we're leading towards is, I'm sure you're familiar with the Kansas experiment. And the Kansas experiment, basically, they phased out income taxes, and they predicted that what would happen is there would be more revenue. There were going to be all these increases in companies coming in. That's exactly the opposite of what happened. Because as a rule, 10 to 30% of the money that is reduced as far as taxes will come back in revenue. So, long story short, where does the other 70 to 90% come? Okay, they're currently saying there's no plans to increase the sales tax. Is that going to remain to be the case?
Yeah.
How are we going to make up that difference? And what happens, are we going to be able to meet the needs of our budget without increasing the sales tax? I oppose that because my fear is we're going to end up having to increase sales taxes on, food, medicine. I know during this whole debate process on this bill, Tennessee was often cited. Tennessee doesn't have an income tax, they have the sales tax. Well, the problem with that situation is Tennessee also has the most visited national park in the country. They have Nashville, Knoxville, Memphis, lots of major metropolitan areas and lots of tourist dollars coming into the area. That doesn't compare to Kentucky. So we're going to have to make up the difference. It's not going to come from tourist dollars. Where's it going to come from? Obviously, it's going to come from Kentuckians. The only way to do that, and what this legislature really appears to sort of want to do, is through sales tax. It's going to happen. They're going to have to increase sales tax across the board. I don't want to be paying money on my prescriptions plus taxes. I don't want anyone's grandmother to have to decide if they're going to have food today or their medication.
Right.
So I oppose any attempt to expand the sales tax and make up the tax burden.
Okay. Well, in March of 2023, Andy Beshear signed Bill 47 into law legalizing medical cannabis for Kentuckians beginning January 1st. Where are you on this issue, and would you consider legalizing recreational use?
Honestly, I'm just going to be truthful. I've not thought a whole lot about recreational use. It's one of those things that I don't have a problem with. I do know that there is a lot of medical benefit. My mom, as I mentioned earlier, she passed away in 2014, and she had a lot of health problems. And she had a lot of pain as a result of that. And medical marijuana wasn't available at that point in time. And I do think it would have helped her. Mm-hmm. So I do support medical marijuana, glaucoma, pain, cancer treatments. There's a lot of use for that. And honestly, just to be truthful, I haven't thought too much about that issue. I would totally be willing to, read a bill and see how I felt at that point, and depending on what the bill said.
Okay. What about school safety?
School safety is very important to me, as I have a child who's 11, and I don't think kids should have to worry about whether or not they're going to come home at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. I honestly don't know what the answer is. I grew up on a farm. I'm not going to sit here and say, I oppose guns, because I know there's a place. But I also know that I've talked to some of my son's friends, and we're starting a nonprofit. It's kind of a long story, but one of the girls was asked, they were talking about civics and what they would like to see happen. And she said, I just want to not have to worry that I'm not going to come home to my mom at the end of the day.
Right.
Which hurt me, because this little girl was 9. And when I was 9, I was worried about what snack I was going to eat at home.
Yeah.
So I do think it's something we need to address. I'm just honestly not sure what the answer is at this point in time. Obviously we need to increase school safety. I know Franklin County has an early warning system, but let's keep them out before they get in the building, so we have to have the early warning system.
Right.
I like the idea of having, people in schools that can provide security.
Yeah.
So
I think when I was 7 or 8, my biggest fear was just getting on the wrong bus.
I know. I mean, it was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And that kids think about this, but then you see the news, and it's a real situation.
It is.
So
what do you think some of the top concerns, particularly from the business community, are in the district?
Obviously, I work in employee relations, which is a division of HR.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest problems that we're having is just staffing, finding people to work. And I think, educating people is one way we can meet that need. I think, taxes are another issue. Unemployment is an issue. But obviously, from my standpoint, probably staffing, finding employees.
Well, and that was the next question, is that staffing is a major obstacle. So how do we fix that? What about opioid epidemic?
Mm-hmm. As I mentioned, my mom had a lot of problems. Mm-hmm. And she was prescribed opiates as a result of her condition. She had a lot of pain. She had neuropathy. It was not pretty. But I know how, just because hers was a medical necessity.
Right.
And I know how it impacted her just as far as medical need. This is a very big issue in Kentucky, and especially parts of eastern Kentucky. And again, this is one of those, I don't know what the answer is, but I know what the answer is not. And the answer is not making it more difficult for people who need the medication to get it. Because, as I said, my mom needed it. And like I said, I honestly don't know, and I hope I hope we find that answer one day.
Okay. Do you think the Kentucky legislature is adequately transparent?
No.
Okay. And then what steps would you take to make it more transparent?
You know, this year, as I said, my son has had a bill every year for 5 years. And this year, they sort of changed the way that bills are submitted and bills are visible prior to session. And I don't agree with that because, quite frankly, as I've mentioned, I believe government works for us. I believe that the citizens should have a right to say, you know, I support this bill, I don't support this bill, vote on this bill, vote against this bill. We can't do that if we can't see the bill.
Right.
So, you know, they suspend the rules, they, you know, last minute committee substitutions, you know, voting on a bill at the last minute. I do not support any of these measures because, again, you work for us.
Right.
Give us a say in the process.
Okay. What's the first bill that you've already actually had a bill, but
Yes.
as a state rep, what's the first bill you would introduce?
Well, the first one, I'm not going to lie, is going to be my son's.
Yeah.
But that's
Well, we're going to rule that one out.
Yeah, we're
That's
going to rule
already in
that one out. I'm
process.
going to cheat.
Yeah.
Honestly, I would probably roll back the changes that have happened to our unemployment system. And I say that because of this. As I mentioned earlier, I've worked in unemployment. I've sat across the table from people in some of the, you know, most trying times of their lives. I can tell you that unemployment is needed. Currently, there's like a sliding scale based on the unemployment numbers in the state. Used to, you were eligible for benefits in Kentucky, I believe it was 26 weeks. Now, there's a sliding scale. Currently, it's 12 weeks. And your benefit amount is dependent on how far along you are in the process, how selective you can be with a job, depends on how far along you are in the process. The fact is, I was unemployed. As a result, it was kind of a funny story. I was unemployed from unemployment.
Yeah.
Because during the CARES Act provisions, I could work as a contractor and adjudicate cases. After those were over, I couldn't. So long story short, you get laid off. I can tell you it took me every bit of those 26 weeks to find a comparable job.
Yeah.
Every bit. As a matter of fact, I signed my job offer on the last day of that 26 weeks period. It was not because I wasn't looking. I put in literally hundreds of applications. It just took that long.
Right.
There's a lot of talk about Kentucky's workforce participation rate. And I think a lot of people need to know what that actually measures. You know, it sort of creates this false illusion that there's a lot of Kentuckians out there that just aren't working. And that's not the case. The workforce participation rate measures everybody in Kentucky age 16 and over that's not institutionalized. So, you know, anyone obviously that's in jail, prison, nursing homes, that sort of thing. This is including retirees.
Yeah.
This is including people who are disabled. Okay? Yes, we have a low workforce participation rate. Kentucky is an aging state. Kentucky's an unhealthy state, you know, and we're a rural state. The fact is there are areas of Kentucky that there just aren't a lot of jobs.
Right.
We can address that factor by bringing jobs to the people. How do we do that? You know, it still amazes me to this day that there are areas of the state that don't have access to high-speed internet. I've worked remotely since 2017. Okay, I have had job opportunities that I would have never had the chance had I, you know, not had broadband. Think of the opportunities in some of the rural areas of the 56th or even Eastern Kentucky, Western Kentucky, if they had access to high-speed internet. Even an entry-level customer service job pays better than most local employers.
Right.
Which benefits the tax base. If you have more income coming into the area, you have more of a tax base. It's a win-win. I don't know why we're not doing it.
Okay.
So,
All right. Well, this is actually your time. You get to look into that camera we talked about and the arrow over there and just basically ask the people for your vote and say whatever you'd like to say.
okay. Hi, my name is Miche, and I'm not your typical politician. I'm a mom who believes in Kentucky. I believe in Kentuckians, and I want to get Kentucky back to work. I want to get Kentucky at the forefront of progress. I want us to work together. I want a Kentucky that's not divided anymore. I want a Kentucky that stands together. The Kentucky that I know and the Kentucky I grew up in, that's what I want for my son. So if you agree with this, please support me in the Democratic primary in May. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for coming in today. I think our viewers appreciate hearing from you and your views, and best of luck in the race.
Thank you.
And I want to thank our viewers for watching. It's essential to be informed before you vote in the primary on May 21st, and I hope that this show helps you make those choices. Thank you.